Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Run It Back, episode number 15. I'm Menelik Fernandez, your host, and as I've mentioned in every episode, obviously I do this with affiliation with Rising Coaches. A lot of the coaches that jump on and join our conversations are from that community, so big shout out to Rising Coaches for continuing to support me in this creative venture and for continuing to connect coaches through probably the largest coaching tree in basketball, and giving us the means to be able to interact with other fine coaches and figure out their point of view. So the premise of Run It Back, this show, as I mention every week, is basically we take teams that have played previously and we have a theoretical rematch and we discuss what worked, what didn't work, what we would do differently, what we liked, etc., all the way through. And today we are super fortunate. We're doing the Newman versus Fort Hays State rematch from Newman's perspective from February 29th. And as I mentioned, we're super fortunate to have Coach RJ Allen, the head coach of Newman, join us. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to try and do you a little bit of justice with a brief introduction here. Coach Allen just completed his 4th season as head coach at Newman and his 10th with the school overall. Prior to that, he spent 5 years as an assistant at Concordia University in St. Paul, Minnesota, where he helped them to their first 20-win season in 2006 and 7. And if I'm not mistaken, that is actually still the winningest season they've had. I might have to go back and double check that one, but I believe that to be correct. And then prior to that, Coach was a 2-year starter and captain for that same team. And then in high school was, these accolades go on and on. 2-time All-City, All-State selection, leading them to a 6A championship, etc. And, won the Kansas Jayhawk Community College Conference with a 30-3 record when he first moved into college. So highly decorated would be an understatement to say the least there. It's a real pleasure to have you, Coach Allen.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So as I mentioned, we're doing Newman versus Fort Hays State. I want to start by talking a little bit about preparation for this game. You can give us a little bit of detail of your season if you like as well. You did play them once before during the season. So I'm kind of curious, like, what is your preparation method overall? Like, how many games are you watching? Are you lending more weight to the specific rematch, the specific game that you played with them? And like, what's important to you in your process of preparation?
Well, what we do, I got a staff of 3 coaches that work for us, and we kind of delegate scouts to each assistant. And that assistant, whoever has that scout, him and I, we kind of collab and try to devise a game plan that we feel like gives our team an opportunity to go win a basketball game, to say the least. So, going in, we normally, depending on time, we try to go 3 games out. So the last 3 games, we call them 3 outs or 5 outs.
Right.
If we have a little bit more time, we'll watch, their last 5 games and kind of try to devise a scout to give to our guys. This particular game, I believe it was a 3 out. So we watched their last 3 games. We will go back and watch the game. Like you said, this was the second time that we have played them, and try to dissect what it is that, we did well and what it is that we need to try to do going into this game differently that may give us a better opportunity to win or win again, whatever that may be. So coming into Fort Hays State, that's traditional. They have a great tradition. They're extremely physical. We felt like going into this game, their strength was in their post players. They had a kid that was 6'7" kid, scored inside out, shot low 50s at the first time we played them from 3, which is really efficient. So we wanted to try to, keep them try to keep us out of rotations when they went, put us in ball screens. So we tried to switch a little bit early on and their point guard the first time around just torched just wasn't,
Right.
a good matchup for us. The forward didn't hurt us like we thought, the first time around. So, second time going into this game that we're going to watch, we just kind of talked about, not switching, maybe trying to stay flat. We had a forward that really struggled in our ball screen defense, so I had to try to think outside the box. Like I said, we had a 6'7" kid that was our best player, really mobile, that ended up, we lost due to injury early in the year. So, that kind of hurt us in ball screen defense. So we kind of had to think outside the box and adjust and just try to find what worked game to game. So we had to do that a lot. So that was a little difficult. Offensively, what we wanted to try to do to them is we wanted to try to play downhill basketball. We wanted to try to space the floor. Paint touches are extremely important to us and what we try to get done, down the floor. We want to try to shoot paint twos just like everybody else and get to the free throw line. We had some guys that were really good at that, just playing downhill and putting pressure on defenses and trying to see if we could get them in foul trouble because we felt like they weren't as deep as they had been in previous years. So that was kind of the game plan to just, try to – we weren't going to switch ball screens early on, and I think we ended up having to go back to that. And we were going to try to play downhill basketball, spread them out, get post touches, paint touches, and try to live at the line and kind of see how that went and try to keep our energy up and go from there.
Appreciate that, Coach. So just talking a little bit more in terms of preparation, you mentioned that, your coaches and you watch them all, you get a couple games out, you do a 3-out or a 5-out, and then you come up with your plan. Let's talk about a little bit of like how you implement that, especially on such a short turnaround. Like I said, you only had the 2 days for this game. So I would assume that what is at least for me, when I do it, my typical delivery method of a scout is not the same on a short turnaround as it is when you say have a week to prepare. So like in this particular instance, did you have shoots? Did you have walkthroughs? Did you have like an in-class sitting around? And then talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about your personal philosophy on less is more versus information and a ton of it type deal. Like which end of the spectrum do you sit on, and how do you deliver your message to your guys?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for us, what that routine looks like is day before the game, we do a lot with film. We teach in film. I'm a believer in that. So as a team, the coach, whoever has the scout, is going to go through personnel. Second time around, it's really quick. We try to go, 5 to 7 minutes. We'll show a couple clips on each guy, strengths, and then maybe something that we feel like we could exploit matchup wise or something like that. So we'll go through personnel,
Can
through
I just jump in
clips.
real quick before you
Yep.
continue? One specific question about that. This one always interests me. Do you, when you're doing personnel, do you give everyone, or do you really kind of work with your matchups? Like, so for instance, both Coach Matt and Coach Mike are in this call. And if Coach Mike is on your team, would you be like, Mike, you're guarding Matt, he does this, this, and this, and I'm going to show you predominantly what's happening there? Or is it like, everybody, this is what Matt does, everybody should be prepared in case you end up, switching on to him, or, everybody should know everything?
So we do give our guys a paper scout. So on
Right.
that paper scout, we kind of predetermine matchups. Matchups are kind of big in us because we typically don't switch very much in our man-to-man defense. So each guy will see his name based on who he could potentially guard that game. So everyone will get that piece of paper, and everyone will watch the personnel clips. But what we tell our guys is you pay attention to those matchups, pay attention to those strengths. We'll even, we try to engage our guys because we know, just like everyone else, their attention spans, they'll aren't very long. So we'll kind of engage our guys. We'll have, we may ask questions, things we feel like they should know that we have already covered to try to engage them in conversation a little bit. It's not very much. It may be, hey, tell me a strength
Sure.
of your matchup. What does he do well? What have we talked about? Things like that. We'll do that really towards the end. And then from there, we'll watch. We call them team clips. We'll have that already clipped up. It's not very long, so that entire session of film, we try to keep it right around 10 to 12 minutes. So we'll go through personnel clips, and then we'll do team clips of them, of kind of what they've done lately. Hey, this is what they're trying to do offensively. This is what they want to get accomplished. This is what we need to do if we see another team defend some actions really well. And that's something that we want to use. We'll say, hey, this is, see how they guarded this. This is exactly what we want to get accomplished. If there's something defensively that we see that we think we could try to exploit, we'll say, hey guys, look at this action. Hey, great ball reversals. It'll put them in rotations, or skip passes or something like that. So those guys get an understanding of that. And then we just we go to the floor. I like watching, going through the scout and watching film prior to practice. So now my philosophy is we kind of had that conversation in a classroom setting. So now you have a visual of kind of what we're talking about when we go on the floor. We don't. I mean, we're a pack team. We run the pack. We weren't very good defensively last year, but
Well, I would interject, Coach, and say that I saw some really good multiple effort plays in there.
Sure. Yeah.
I'll give you the virtual pat on the back. Great job in there for sure. There were definitely some I think I've got a clip or two that I was going to ask you about a little bit later, but there's some things where, you're high tagging and still recovering and you're taking away a short roll and still managing to close. So you definitely instilled some fighting spirit in your guys for sure.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And like I said, I just feel like it helps speed up that process of when we go through a scout. So day before game, we'll come in, we'll practice, we'll do, what we do. That's kind of our saying. We're going to do what we do regardless, defensively especially.
Okay.
But we'll practice, and then at last 15-minute segment, we'll kind of slow them down, and we'll walk through. We'll pick 2 or 3 actions that we want to make sure we cover and we go over, that we feel like it's kind of what they do, the majority of what they do. So we'll go through that, walk through that with those guys. And again, I feel like since they have seen that action prior to practice, it helps speed up that process. And
For sure.
we have a scout team, guys that are either redshirting. So we'll take that scout group earlier in the day. That's something else that I'll mention. They'll come in earlier in the day, and we'll say, hey, these are the actions that we're going to run and scout, so that those guys, so it doesn't take a whole lot of time to have to, walk them through. We want to try to be efficient with our time and
Right.
get them in, get them out, and keep them off their legs, and especially late in the season, and try to keep them as fresh as possible. So we want that whole preparation to be, as seamless as possible, so that we keep them engaged, we have their undivided attention, and we can get the message across without, dragging it out, being 20, 30 minutes. I try to stay away from that.
So going back to something you said, I think I asked this question in every episode, and I think I already understand your answer, but bear with me. You mentioned you're a do what you do kind of team, for screen coverages or for off-ball action coverages. How do you implement changes? Are you practicing them earlier in the season? So it's hey, we're going to do this primarily, but you should be able to do this as well. Because in this game specifically, I noticed you were in drop. I noticed then you went to starting like shocking or high hedging the ball. I noticed that you were a little bit flat on certain ones. So there was definitely changes in game adjustments that were happening. So you guys have to know how to do that.
Yeah,
Like what's sort of
yeah.
like your process overall for how you're implementing stuff?
So we have a base coverage for everything. Ball screen coverages. We teach it. We teach a base coverage, off ball screens. So we drill that. I'm a drill guy. We try to implement that, and then as we go, we'll get more what we call scout specific. So there may be a situation where we're preparing for a team and we say, hey, our base coverage is flat hedging ball screen. So we'll say, hey, we want to work on switching. We're going to go into this game. We're going to switch, try to stay out of rotations or whatever the case may be. So we'll go into, preparing for a game. We'll go, maybe a 8 to 10 minute segment where we're working on, the repetition of switching. And that's kind of how that evolves as we go through the year, for us.
Awesome. So going from general to specific on your 2-day turnaround, what, if anything, are some of the things that you can remember for this particular matchup? Like you said, offensively, you wanted to get downhill, but like, are there particular matchups that you wanted to attack? Are there particular actions that you wanted to go to? What did you identify? And then once you were in game, how close did what you want from your game plan resemble to what you were doing once you were there? Because there's a lot of times
That's
where
all.
it's like, all right,
Exactly. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
forget about that. We're just gonna move
That
into what we have to do.
that happens. It
Yeah.
happens. It happened in that game. Yeah, like you said, we had an undersized 4-man kid that was really good. I think he, at some point, I don't know if he finished the year leading the league in double doubles, but he was really athletic, about 6'5", was really good at getting downhill. We wanted to try to isolate him some, and get him out in space, especially once they got to their bench.
Right.
There was a really like that matchup, so we were going to try to space him and put him in some isolation situations, and quick ball reversals, to try to get him touches to see if we can't, put pressure on their defense. So I remember going into that. That was one of the things that we had talked about. Always post touches. We want to play with last year's group. We wanted to try to play inside out. We felt like we were at our best, when we played inside out. So those were really the two things that we talked a lot about with our group. We had some stats that got the ball where we kind of wanted it to get it to, in those scenarios, and to try to put pressure on them. Like I said, we wanted to try to get to the free throw line to see if we can't get into their bench and make them play their bench a little bit.
Coach, how much of a believer and do you teach the shot spectrum that is like generally accepted now? What is considered a good shot for you, and like, so the reason I ask is like, I notice your first 4 shots of the game are threes. One of them's in transition. It's pretty quick.
Yeah.
So, like you mentioned paint touches earlier, but what's sort of like your philosophy on things like that? And then how reactionary are you to bad shots? Do you bench guys for multiple times, or like is everybody treated the same? Do certain players get away with a little bit more? What's your leash like, so to speak?
That's another good question. Our shot spectrum is probably identical to a lot of other guys. We value layups, dunks, those type of shots. Then we want to get to the free throw line if we can. Catch and shoot threes are something that we value. Paint twos, and then we try to devalue non-paint twos a little bit. I guess I shouldn't say devalue, but it's probably ranked last in that spectrum of shot selection. So we try to teach that. We got a couple drills, that we practice We have a game we call shot selection game, and we
There
we,
you
we
go.
basically we basically grade their shots,
Right.
and that point system is valued on the type of shot that you take, and to try to help develop a sense of understanding. Hey, this is a good shot. This is obviously you're going to get more points on higher value shots in our shot selection game versus those shots that we value a little less. So that's how we try to teach it and to gain an understanding. It's in theory it's good, and then we get to games and guys aren't necessarily having a great understanding of that. I think last year's team, they struggled with that a little bit, of just really understanding how to generate those high value shots.
Right.
So that's always a constant teaching, that you're constantly teaching to try to get those guys to understand one thing, and buy-in is the other side of it that you have to get out of your group. So those are things that we were working on. For me, my leash is, I think it's a little bit personnel. I would be lying to you if I said everybody it has the same leash.
No, they
There are
don't.
guys that have proven, that they can make shots, and they're going to have to take some shots. That kind of gain my trust, and that's kind of how we operate. Now, again, we try to teach and practice, so that we avoid that. But in a game scenario, you take an ill-advised shot, you'll probably hear something from me. If it's 2 or 3 times, yeah, we'll probably have to sit you down so you can recompose yourself, and go from there. But one bad shot, I'll probably say something to you. But we want those guys to obviously play free and play loose and not overthink too, and just play basketball, be basketball players. So it's more, I guess, a feel, how a game is
Sure.
going personnel wise.
So for future players or for current players that play for you, what is the best way to go about earning your trust? Is it just making those shots? Is it demonstrating an understanding over time? Is it the compete level in practice versus games, or is it a combination of everything? What's sort of your philosophy on that?
I think it is a combination, of everything, but a lot of that is done in practice.
Right.
I'm not a hey coach, put me in and I'll show you. It's like, no, you show me every single day, and then I'll put you in, and then
Right.
you kind of gain that trust, and that's how we go about it. So again, if you want to get on the floor, you want to earn, some of those responsibilities. Like, you got to have consistency in practice. We give you ample opportunities every single day. We're evaluating in practice every single day. So we'll give you those opportunities in practice. Now you show us, then we'll put you in the game. It's not the vice versa. It's not the other way around, at least for me.
Appreciate that, coach. Because so for me, personally, just as a total aside, I film all my practices and I have everything statted out type deal. So it becomes very hard to argue because I'm not eye testing anything, right? So it's when you're shooting here, you're getting X points per possession, but when you're shooting here, you're getting Y points per possession. It's really difficult to argue with these numbers. I
Right.
need you to shoot from here, and
Yeah.
and when you don't, you're gonna go sit down next to me type deal.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
So, talking specifically about this game, let's start in the first half a little bit. How did you feel it was going, and what adjustments do you think? I'm sure you probably rewatched it a little bit, and definitely rewatched it right after it happened type deal.
Sure.
What, if anything, did you like, and what, if anything, would you have done differently specific to the first half? Because the second half we're going to talk a little bit about for sure, and I have some film clips that I want to ask you some things about that you've kind of already touched on, but just what did you like?
I thought early on, like you said, we started the game. It was our senior night, so there were some emotions. I think we that wasn't our traditional lineup. That's not the group of guys we
Right.
started. So we had a couple guys playing out of position. to honor the guys that have kind of been in our program and done things the right way. So we made that decision to go with them. And I thought early on, like you said, we took a lot of, quick shots. We took a lot of threes, a lot of quick shots. I didn't feel like the ball didn't have great ball movement early on. And then we kind of settled in, and we were able to, kind of get the ball where we wanted. We executed a couple sets. I think we got to the free throw line a little bit. I'd have to go back and look at the stats, but we were right there, right where we wanted. We did talk about our ball screen defense, and that was our Achilles heel last year. Just with the forward that we ended up having to implement and play a lot, it just wasn't very mobile. And again, the first time we played them, we were going to switch and just we were going to make their point guard make shots, and he made shots. Like, he torched.
Right.
And so we went to more of a flat, and even it was a drop coverage, not by design. That's just how
Okay.
it ended up being. And they were, they dragged their dribble out. They would throw it back to their stretch forward, and then he started making some shots. So we had to talk and address that. Like we said, we were tagging from the high side. We call stunning, from the weak side, and really trying to get in his vision to buy our forward just a second or two to get a hand up, to get back to contest, or make him make one extra pass and live with the results with that, just because he shot it at such a high clip. So those were some of the things that we talked about going into halftime, like how we wanted to address that with the guys, and what kind of adjustments we felt like were necessary to make in the second half that may put us in an opportunity to go win a game. We did go. We have a matchup 2-3 zone that we didn't utilize very much in the season. Like I said, we're probably 80-20, probably more 90-10 when it comes to man to zone ratio.
Right.
But we did throw in our matchup just to give them a different look, to slow them down and try to keep them out of rhythm. I think there's times offensively you can kind of get into a rhythm where you're executing, the ball's moving. The morale is high, and guys are just they're playing really well. So for us, we tried to throw our matchup at them a little bit. We talked about that to just try to give them a different look, try to make them have to execute a little differently, and see if we can't get them deep in shot clocks. And they don't play extremely fast anyway. They're more methodical. But again, just try to make that point guard have to, decipher and make decisions and kind of go from there. So those were some of the things that we talked about at halftime, after the first half concluded.
So you got ahead of me a little bit. My next question was, what specifically were you talking to them about at halftime? What did you see? And one of the things that you mentioned that I was going to mention was that I actually thought that there was a real free throw disparity in this game. So it ended up being you guys shot 17 and they shot 30, but you only took one in the first half. And I was going to ask if you would attribute that to, I don't know, you got to tread delicately when you ask this. Maybe not everything going your way from an officiating standpoint, or would you attribute it to maybe your guys not being as aggressive as they could be? And then the question that follows that is that, like, if you're not getting the calls that you feel you should be, what adjustments do you make personally? Are you of the standpoint of, let's just keep attacking and force them to make calls, or are you trying to go to other actions that you're familiar with?
No, I'm not. I don't necessarily kind of go away from some of the things. Our group, like, we played downhill, and I understand, like, that can be very difficult to officiate. And it was a really physical game.
Right.
And we felt like there were opportunities missed where we attacked and they defended us illegally, and we just didn't get the call. And for us, as coaches, and our guys, we have to have next play mentality. Like, you got to continue. You can't dwell on it. It's next play, next play, next play. Continue doing that. I think it's my responsibility as a head coach to try to, put that on the officials' radar. Like, hey, we're going, we're legal. We're getting knocked off our line of, in the drives or whatever. To just continue to have that dialogue as respectfully as possible with those guys, to just keep them aware and put a little pressure on them to have to make those calls down the stretch. So it was a really physical game. I think we ended up getting to the line a little more in the second half. But again, going into the game, that was our game plan. We wanted to play downhill. We had to get post touches. We had to get paint touches. So that was kind of our philosophy with that group.
Appreciate. So do you allow your players to speak to the refs, and do you do any mental prep work with them for when they feel it's not going their way, or are you I only talk to the refs kind of guy, and like, how do you enforce that with your team?
I'm not like we tell our guys, you don't say anything. I'll have my one-on-ones with our point guards, and they come in quite a bit. We'll talk and discuss, and they watch, quite a bit of film with us, just from a learning standpoint and having a responsibility standpoint, just making sure that we're all on the same page. So I may delegate a little bit of that to them, just understanding, making sure that they have a good understanding of what to say, and how to approach an official. But everybody else, we try to keep it next play mentality. Like, if you have a problem, take it to the point guard. Point guard will take it to the official, let me know, and then we'll follow up. But I try to keep my guys like, there's nothing to say. And
it's not going to change anything a lot.
Yeah,
of
it's not.
Time, right?
You can't go back in time. They're not going to reverse the call. So again, your responsibility is next play. Nothing more important than the next play. So that's it's always still work in progress, but we make that loud and clear. Like, guys, you have to have a next play.
So you mentioned your zone a little bit. It's one of the clips that I have. I'll get into the clips in a few minutes and ask you some questions from those. But when you're implementing, you said like you're 90% man, you're 10% zone. You threw in your 2-3 for a little bit in there. It actually looked like you threw in a 3-2 briefly as well. Maybe it was just an alignment that I wasn't super familiar with at the beginning of the set there. But the 2-3 I definitely saw on there. And what are sort of your goals? Because like it looked like you were trapping the corners and you were being real aggressive. Do you only throw it in at specific times in the game, and what's sort of going through your mind when you're deciding to implement it?
Yeah, like I said, we don't play a whole lot of zone. So when we do implement it, it is more strategic, just to give a different look. Maybe it is to try to really disrupt and break rhythms of offenses. When we feel like, guys, they've developed a nice rhythm offensively, we'll try to throw something else at them. Some of it is to check clock and try to maybe get teams that play a little faster, deeper in shot clocks, and make them feel a little bit more uncomfortable. We will trap short corners at times. And again, sometimes that's scout specific based on personnel and what we feel like we can take advantage of. But for us, it's more of a feel, I think, than anything. Because again, like I said, we're predominantly a man team. But if we feel like it's necessary, it's going to break a rhythm. Personnel wise, hey, we feel like we could take advantage of who they have out there on the floor. We'll definitely make that adjustment and go to our matchup.
And is that more so for like when you're teaching it before, less so in games? Are you teaching it with the perspective of we want to get teams deeper in the shot clock, we want deflections, or are you just saying like, hey, we're hyper aggressive, we're trying to steal the ball, we don't care if we're committing a foul or two or whatever, we want it back when we're throwing it in? What's your viewpoint on it?
That's another good question. My viewpoint on that is like, kind of like our man. We want to keep the ball in front. We want to keep the ball in front. We want to build walls. We want to contest everything. So we want to try to keep guys out of, maybe a situation where we're trying to protect the guy defensively as well too. But again, our philosophy with what we do defensively is predicated on keeping the basketball in front of us. We want to keep it in front. We want to keep it out of, our man-to-man. We want to keep it out of the pack. We want to keep it out of the paint. We want to build walls, and we want to contest everything. So that's kind of our philosophy when it comes even to our matchup. There's no different there. We're going to pressure the ball. I feel like that's important, and contest shots and do what we can to try to keep guys off the free throw line.
I'm going to jump into a little bit of film. Appreciate that answer, Coach. Let me see. So I'm going to try this twice because sometimes when I share my screen and optimize the video, I lose my window of people. Yeah, I did again. I don't know why that happens. There's got to be some sort of thing that I don't understand about that, where it's like if you optimize the film, you lose the people in your call unless you do it without the optimized way. So there's a few things in here that I brought up. We discussed already. Couple quick shots early in the game, and we were just talking about like what your shot selection is, and then getting into some scouting type stuff. I was wondering this action. So I now know after the past few months of developing stuff, it's not called this, but we call this loop action, where you're coming up the middle. And I'm wondering, if you did anything specific for that type of stuff and how deep your scouts go into sets like this. Like, was this a set that made your list here? And what, if anything specific, are you doing on your walkthrough to try and defend it? So, like, they actually ended up getting into mid ball screen, but really specifically about that horns action where they're coming up through the center.
Yeah, for them, what we had kind of determined, they call T-game action. What they're trying to get accomplished, and like I said, they played through their forwards as well. Is that they've ran a lot of actions where they would put their forwards in down screening actions to get post touching. That's that's what they were trying to get accomplished. So for us, it was more so not necessarily for our guards, like we're going to tell you to get through the screen, because that's not necessarily what they're not trying to score out of that, what you said, that loop action. What they were trying, and if you run it back, I think it was the kid 21, Vitsma, who ends up, let that run. It's my internet, but 21.
No, it's probably mine actually from not having the video optimized. Sorry if it's choppy for you.
Oh, right there. That's, if you freeze it, that's what they're trying to get accomplished. It was that down screen action into a post touch. Like they ran a ton of different actions to get to that right there. And that's what we had determined was what we had to make sure we defended well. So we wanted to keep our forward high. We fronted in the post or tried to. The really big kid, we were 3/4 on the high side in the post, but we wanted to try to take that away. So we did that. And then they ended up getting into middle pick and roll. And again, like they figured that out too after the first time we played them, that we struggled, mightily with them in our pick and rolls, just because the forward would pop out of it, and their point guard is a good little player too. So he, we had tried to switch, we had tried to flash show, like we did a bunch of different things to try to slow them down. But I really felt like we didn't have a really good answer. It was just, that's where we struggle with this team.
Interesting. Yeah, there's some. I mean, there were a ton of adjustments in this game, more so than I've seen in some of the other run it backs that I've done, where it's like, okay, to me, it's clear that this coach is sticking with one thing, and if he gets beat by it, he gets beat by it. It looked to me like you were trying different things, and like as a coach, I appreciate that personally. I'm of the viewpoint of guys should be able to do everything, and sure, they might specialize in certain things, but jack of all trades, master of none is probably better for me. This one is one of your offensive clips. I'm just wondering, sort of from your shot selection spectrum, I'll run it back a couple times just in case it's choppy for you. You twist it and you get that 15, 18-foot jump where you're attacking the drop. What do you think of the shot? And typically when somebody's in drop against you, what are you teaching your guys in terms of attacking? Oh, we lost coach for a second there. Uh-oh. What's going on, gentlemen? How's everybody doing this morning while we wait for him to join us? Good stuff. I'll pause. All right, so we paused for a little bit. I'm just firing it right back up now. We lost you for a second, Coach. Apologies. So my question was attacking the drop, and if you're okay with this particular shot from your guys, and what you overall teach your guys in terms of attacking the drop. So you twist the screen, you attack the double side, you pull up at the elbow here. It's a good shot. You make it. But like over the course of a game, are you fine with that overall, or are you asking guys to take on the big and you're like, I don't know, what are your teaching points really?
Really, we want to try, again, it's all predicated on trying to get the ball to the paint, try to break the paint, draw defenders, play out of that. That particular kid who took that shot, over the course of the season proved to be much more efficient in that area. So I was fine with that shot. Like, that's a shot we had deemed and determined, hey, that's a, if you can get to a 15-foot pull-up because of, kind of what you have shown over the course of the year, like, that's a good shot. Take it. That's
Right.
that's a shot that you could get. We tried to change the angle late, and our forward who ended up setting that screen, not the most mobile kid, bigger body kid, but again, we wanted to try to change late and still being legal and tack that side. I didn't necessarily like our spacing in that particular clip, but again, we ended up getting him downhill. Like I said, we wanted to try to get to the paint. We felt like we would get, good things would happen for this group once we got paint touches. So we're just trying to fire off the ball. We're going to roll hard with our forwards, and we're gonna space with the other three guys.
Nice. So moving on, the next one is a defensive clip. And I'm sorry, Coach, I think it might be one that's kind of like an eye twitch one defensively when you're looking at it. But I'm just wondering what your teaching points are. So I'll get ahead to the point of where I'm asking from. So the first screen gets twisted, and now they're attacking single side on the reject. Are you typically teaching your guys to be up into the ball handler right now to force them to accept? Or and then from there, are you okay with the ball side help and the help, the MIG, the most important guy, the low guy? Is he late in your mind? Like, what overall in this clip needs to change for you?
Yeah, there's a lot needs to change on this one. It's we don't get to the level of the screen with our forward, and then again, we allow him to reject the ball screen. Our teaching point is, in our terminology, is we want to jump his hip, make him use the screen. So he allows him to reject the ball screen, which is a no-no. And then the second no-no in our situation or in our program, strong side corner kid is going to sell out to the ball.
Right.
And that is not what we want to do. We want to break to shooters. We'll stunt and break is our terminology. And then we are out of rotation. Our weak side our kid on the weak side is out of rotation. He's coming to contest, and why he's doing that, he's wrong. He leads, which is fine because he's unrestricted. That's what he has to do. But he's late because he's out of position. He's late because he's out of position. But again, it all goes back to keeping the ball in front of you. Like
Right.
that's the on-ball defender has that responsibility. He's got to keep the ball in front of you, and he's got to make him use the ball screen. Can't allow him to turn it down and reject it.
So I have two questions from what you just said. So like I have similar philosophies to you, it sounds like, and I think they're probably the more common philosophies. But you know, the ball handler makes a good play and rejects. For your teaching point for the ball defender, you say jump his hip. Are you teaching, first of all, is it the hip that's closer to the sideline or the hip that's closer to the rim line? And second, when you're saying jump his hip, is it you're teaching with his feet and splitting it, or are you actually, hey, get your forearm on there and control his weight, stick hand, guide hand, etc.? Like, what are your teaching points in there?
Yeah, we're gonna jump his hip, which we're gonna straddle his foot that is closest to the sideline,
Right.
um, to completely try to take that path, that route of rejection away. Now, you know how the game is officiated. You can't touch guys on the perimeter, but you could beat guys up in and around the rim. So on the perimeter, we always show our terminology is show your hands. So he's gonna jump his hip, show his hands. That's what he's supposed to do, and force that ball handler to have to use that screen.
So that's interesting. So like in FIBA, we can touch ball handlers, we just can't control their weight. So it becomes this really like subjective gray area, so to speak, where it's like you can get on him for a second, but then it's a matter of what that ref feels is too much that's affecting their speed, their pace, their rhythm, and I forget the fourth criteria right now, their balance, I think it is the last one. But like we're allowed to teach almost in essence from like the old hand checking days, from like I would associate you and I in the same age group. So probably from around when we played, you could do a little bit more to force them
Yeah.
into it. And I feel what you are faced with is more challenging for a ball defender to be able to force them to use it type deal because they can't put a hand on it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It you have to. That's something that we rep a lot. And we teach it that way, and it is like I remember playing basketball, and you could arm bar guys like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
that makes it a little bit more difficult. But again, you have help with the forward. You have help with the forward, and in our pack, obviously, we help strong side. We help strong side. So we're in theory, you're forcing the basketball to your help anyway.
Right.
You're forcing them to your help. So we feel like we're in position to be able to build a wall and level off that ball handler and keep it in front. Like that's the number one priority for us.
So it brings me to my second question. When he gets rejected, you mentioned a little bit about, sorry, I'm getting choppy here. I apologize. You mentioned a little bit about your guy right here. What are your
Yeah.
teaching points for him? So like I've heard various things about the outside dig, about the stunt, and like how do you want his weight and how much on the line, up the line, et cetera, do you want him to be in an ideal world?
So we're a pack team. So
Right.
he's supposed to start and help and work his way out. So he
Right.
starts and help. That's where he should be starting. And then breaking to the ball as the ball handler is approaching him. Now, some of that is a read. Like if this kid's out of control and you can, take a charge or make a play on the ball, you can do that. But I'm telling you, if you sell out, you got to make a play. Like there's no, like you're gambling there. So again, our teaching point is you're starting in help. So we work in to out. So we're in the pack, starting in help, and then we're working out to shooters. So his responsibility, and if the play was executed correctly, he would be breaking to the corner shooter ball side with hands up to make him have to put air underneath that pass into a closeout.
Awesome. All right, so one more. We end up with a guard forward switch in here that makes you a little bit mismatched. I'm wondering sort of what your doubling the post philosophy is. Was this mandatory? Was this an audible decision? and what are your teaching points when he goes? So I'll run it for you one more time.
Yeah, so in this scenario, um, so the kid that he's guarding, we had deemed a non-shooter who makes the post entry to the forward.
Right.
Uh, that was one of the scenarios, over the course of the game. I think we had got switched for some reason. We had deemed him a non-shooter, so we weren't really going to leave the paint on that kid. So we get mismatched. We're digging, and he just kind of, our forward made a read. Thought it was a good time to go what we call fire, and then we're gonna rotate out of that. And I think it looks like we got a deflection off.
I think you got the ball, actually. I think you came away with it. So
Yeah.
when you're you said you call it fire?
Yes.
Yeah. So when you're in fire, what are your teaching points? Like, is the guy who's the primary defender keeping his hands off and letting the secondary defender do everything? Are you teaching guys to trace the ball? Like, you obviously rep it, drill it, and he's made a decision to go. So what's he doing?
We're always showing our hands, talking about the two on the ball. Like I said, we full front. Majority of the time, I see we got caught behind. We're in a situation with a mismatch, so he's going to pop back. Talking about the defender guarding the forward initially, he's going to pop back. He's going to show his hands, getting in a defensive guarding stance like he would on the perimeter. We'll fire. He'll close out to the trap. They're both going to come foot to foot. They're going to show their hands, and then we'll walk underneath you. We'll try to bump you, be a little bit more physical with you, with our lower half more so than our upper half. We feel like, officials are trained to watch, guys' arms and limbs, but they don't necessarily see, guys getting bumped and walked underneath is what we tell them to do. We just tell them to walk underneath the guy, be big in the trap, and then we rotate out of that fire. We're taking away first pass strong side, and then we're forming that weak side eye again and playing out of that. Top guy has the first pass out regardless of where it goes.
Amazing. I'm going to have more clips than we'll have time, but I do want to get to these next two ones just because they were multiple effort type plays, in my opinion, and we had mentioned it in discussion. So, again, bit of a virtual pat on the back regardless of the end result type deal. But you went to the hedge in here, and you had been in drop previously. And let's get to it. Let it run a little bit. So I don't think they end up with anything out of the clip, if I remember correctly. Oh, no, he does. On this one, he does drop step and get the basket. But so basically, on the double reverse, they get into it. What have you identified? You're about 5 minutes into the game that has made you switch your coverage. And I mean, you touched on it a little bit. And how well do you feel that this particular one is executed, regardless of the result, in terms of the form, et cetera, and the rotation especially?
Yeah, I feel like our forward there, and I can't remember exactly what our philosophy was on that particular play, but he kind of takes himself out of the play. This ball screen, it is in a scoring area, so we hedge it. Looks like we may have trapped it. We're trapping out of it. They end up hitting shake and get a post touch. And then we miss opportunities. Where we miss opportunities to dig out of the post from the weak side. Our terminology we call choking. Obviously, I'm just like everybody else. We don't choke strong side. We choke number 14. Kid should be a little bit more active right here. He allows their forward to get comfortable. This kid was a really good player. Ends up making a really good move out of that. I feel like the other guys are in decent position, away from the ball. And, so again, it's one of those situations where I feel like I don't know. I feel like my big kid might have took himself out of the play. And again, I could have told him to trap. I can't remember that particular play to a T.
So just going back before, before we move on, you said something in there that's interesting to me, and I just want to touch on it. Like you said, the ball ends up getting punched after it hits the shake. From here, you don't do anything from ball side. It, where would you typically choke from? And are you okay with sending the ball to the baseline, or should your primary defender be trying to send it towards the center of the?
Middle. Yeah, trying to send it towards the center of the floor because that's where your help's at. Like you can
Right.
see, the other four defenders are in position to help. He allows him to get back, uh, you know, drop stepping, countering, and getting back to the baseline side. And again, that choke should be coming from 14.
Right.
Unless we've made a adjustment or we're scout specific of saying, hey, this kid's a shooter and we're going to choke a little less. But nonetheless, he's got to be active. I feel like we tell our kids you can't die in your gaps
Right.
defensively. He's still in a gap, just the ball's at a different part of the floor. You can't die in your gap. You have to be active. You got to be active. Stunning at the ball, we define it as just a hand and a foot fake. So he's got to be a lot more active to try to make that forward a little less comfortable. It seems like he gets to a crab. He's in complete control. He counters back baseline side, and he's able to get over his left shoulder, right hand
What's
hook.
very interesting, coach, is that in my conference, and forgive me, my building's having a test fire alarm, so I'm sorry for the interference. But in my conference, most coaches will actually allow their post players to get middle over getting the drop step. They feel that it's less dangerous to be able to get to the center of the floor. So I personally am of the viewpoint of uh, that it's really scout specific, and you can do different things in different scenarios, so to speak.
Yeah.
Uh, but like I would prefer him getting to the middle in this scenario. So that's why I was asking. I was interested to hear your point of view there. So
Yeah, no, that's just kind of our philosophy. We want to try to send that basketball to our help as much as
and
possible.
then last one, like I said, I want to be really conscientious of your time, but this was another one that was a shock, and they ended up short rolling, and I thought it was a pretty good multiple effort play. I was wondering if maybe you could take me through how you feel about the play and what, if anything, could be done better, or if you're just this is a result you're going to live with. So I'm going to run that back one more time for you.
So we hard hedged with our forward, sprinting to get back. You run that back a little further.
Yeah. So here's your hedge.
Yep.
And then here is your tag. And the only thing that I found interesting was that I thought maybe this was an adjustment, because I found earlier when you started hedging, you were tagging from the high guy, and it looks
Yep.
like you end up tagging from the low guy here.
We do. We ended up tagging, and that was more out of necessity than strategy. Right there, to be honest with you, that was just the forward kind of seeing the play develop. We feel like, and that's something we talk a lot about, and we try to teach and film. Really good defenders, really good defensive teams see the play before the play. They kind of see it develop, and that's what we would go back in a film scenario and kind of praise him about seeing the play develop and making a play. He stunts and gets back more so out of necessity than out of rotation, out of a specific or designed rotation.
Amazing. Coach, like I said, I'm going to be respectful of your time. I'll stop the recording in a second after doing my little ending blurb here, but I really want to take a second and say that in all of these, I always do a little bit of research on my guests, and I try to, if I know somebody in common, I'll make a phone call and ask, or send a text and ask. And like everyone that I've spoken to speaks of you in such high regard. Obviously, I've had the good fortune of spending a couple Tuesday nights with you in our group, and I got nothing but respect for you. So I wanted to say thank you for taking a second, sharing your teaching points with us. It makes me a better coach, in my opinion. Hopefully, everybody in here takes a little something with it. And just being fully transparent about the stuff that you run and everything. Some people are really like, But like, you know, I believe in sharing the game and other coaches getting better from it. So thank you for that. I will tip my hat to you for that. And then I will say in closing, another excuse me, another big shout out to Rising Coaches. If you're not a member, please jump on it, because this is the kind of stuff that it is, being able to share and being able to get better from everybody and being able to ask questions, etc. This kind of format is what I love, where coaches are sharing what they're doing, what tools they have, because I think it only makes everybody better. And Rising Coaches has really helped facilitate that for me. So, you know, shameless plug for them. Please join me next week on Run It Back, episode number 16, as we have Coach Tyler Sanborn from Ferrum College joining us. And we'll be discussing Ferrum versus VA Wesleyan from Ferrum's perspective. And then in closing, again, Coach Allen, big thank you for spending an hour with us, and I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. You do great stuff, man. Keep it up. You know, if I could be assistance to anybody, never hesitate. Hit me up.
Appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording there.